Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Virtual Eclipse Community Meetup. I'm your host, Stephanie Swart, and today is our 7th webinar in our Eclipse Photon series. With 85 projects, 246 committers, 73 million lines of code, and 620 contributors, Eclipse Photon is set to release June 27th. But before then, we are showcasing some of the projects that will be included in that release. Today, I'm joined by Karsten Toms and Holger Schill from EDEMIS, who are presenting what's new with Eclipse Xtext 2.14. So without further ado, Karsten, Holger, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, today we would like to talk about Xtext and what is new in the news release 2.14. So for myself, I'm Holger. I'm working for EDEMIS as well as Karsten for nearly 10 years. And I used to work with Xtext for nearly around 10 years.
Yeah, same for me. I'm with EDEMIS already since 15 years, but yeah, also working on and with Xtext since 10 years.
Okay, today's agenda is about a lot of things. So, of course, we would like to talk about the upcoming release. But before doing that, we would like to do something that is not really technical. We would like to talk about the project organization that changed a bit. And we would like to talk about the Xtext release history. After we have talked about the upcoming release, we would like to talk about an outlook and an open discussion. So hopefully you guys are willing to talk with us.
Of course, you can raise your question always or already in between. We are free to answer that.
Yeah. Okay, project organization. You may know that site on Eclipse. They can see who is contributing to Xtext. We have a lot of contributors beside EDEMIS. Still, we have nearly 80%, but there are a lot of people actively contributing to Xtext. Thank you for that. We have a lot of people that we would like to name in person. Here we have our new in addition, project lead Christian, who's doing a great job. He's really caring about Xtext. It's his baby.
Yeah, you may know him also from the forum. He answers questions faster than you type it.
Yeah. We have a new committer, that's Arne Deutsch. He's from EDEMIS as well. He's doing a great job. We will show you some things that he has built for the release.
And last but not least, we have also some contributors that we would like to highlight because they do a great job and contribute much and may become future committers soon. That's first Tifran Werbach from Zigazi and Tamas Schmidt-Klossi from EDEMIS. And besides that, Holger already said we have also many others. Yeah, but would like to highlight those both.
Okay, we would like to do some history. First of all, Karsten will show you a website that he has generated.
Yeah, we prepared a small timeline. And here you can see the full history of Xtext together with Java and the Eclipse releases. And we are now right here with the Photon release, and you see Xtext 2.14 has been released slightly before Photon. It was already last month, and we contributed that version now to Eclipse Photon. Since Oxygen, you see, yeah, with Oxygen we contribute to 12. We contributed release to 13 in between, and you see that the release cycles of Eclipse and Java has changed quite a lot. You know that we had this typical annual releases in Eclipse, and now yeah, this changes now from Photon to 4.9 into a quarterly release cycle. And similar for Java. For Java, we have now half-year releases, and yeah, this is quite a high frequency. You see like a great gap between Java 8 and Java 9, which was over 3 years, and now Java comes out quite often, and yeah, of course, something changes that we need to adopt. So let's go a little bit back in the history, and we see, Xtext first release, first commit was in 2008. So
in May, hey.
it's so we want to celebrate now. Battery.
Yeah, 10-year Xtext. It's a great time. You may have seen from the slides. I can't click anymore. Oh, there. I don't know what happened. So you might have seen there is a gap from 2.10 to 2.11 from the May of 2016 to the beginning of 2017. There was a thing that was introduced because time changed. Xtext changed a lot. So from just being a plugin inside of Eclipse, Xtext evolved to being a language framework for more platforms. And that all came with a LSP, a language server protocol. And not only because of that, we wanted to separate Xtext into different repositories. So we had that big thing, the repository split. Nowadays, we have a lot of different repositories. And the hope was that contribution will get easier by doing that, because some people are only interested in the core of Xtext, others in Eclipse, others in the LSP integration, and others in who knows. But there are a lot of repositories. That sounds reasonable to do that, but what we have seen is in splitting Xtext into different repositories, it comes with a little bit of pain. Because we as committers, we want to commit a whole story into different repositories at one time. And yeah, it depends from one repository to another one. And if you have a workflow with pull requests, it's pain. And we have seen that. And in addition to that pain point, we had tools that cannot really handle different repository at once. And that is why we did a lot for the upcoming release 2.14. So 2.14.
So let's have a look. The first thing is many things that that we have done you won't ever see, but we want to emphasize that it's quite a lot of maintenance work that we have to do. Upgrading all URLs and upgrading versions and upgrading libraries and maintaining copyrights and that's quite a bunch of work that we have to do. And as always said, with the repository split, we have often a situation that we have to produce changes over several repositories. So one change might span 8 repositories. So 8 pull requests, builds that depend on each other, and so, of course, it's quite a lot of work. That's actually not what you see as a user, but yeah, believe us, we have quite many to do with that. But now let's have a look at the concrete things that we typically upgrade. That's, of course, we have to keep up with the newest Gradle versions. We have, of course, Gradle builds, but we also produce Gradle plugins. Same for Maven and Eclipse Tycho. There have been 2 releases in between of Maven Tycho that we have had to use and to test. And so all target platforms for Xtext has changed all the time. For Java, great, we had to update the ASM library and so on. The setup, of course, whenever something changes in the project structure, you as a developer want to just use this setup, and of course we have to manage that it's working for you. Okay, so that might be small things, just upgrades. But now let's look more into features.
Just one thing in addition. As we pointed out, there might be things that you don't see at the beginning, but we've put a lot of effort in making the release cycle smoother, because from Photon on, we will release in a higher frequency. And so it's not reasonable to do that in the way we have done it in the past. So we have to automate a lot of things, and Carsten has done a great job in doing that.
Yeah. As you saw from the history, and you already know, since the last year, we have 2 Java versions that came out, Java 9 and 10, which are both supported by Eclipse Photon, and yeah, we're backported to Oxygen already also. And of course, Xtext has also to be compatible with these versions. Especially the Java 9, or actually it's more the Java module system, this caused quite much pain for us. And same for all yeah, library maintainers in the world. Yeah, it was quite a breaking change for us, and took a long time to get this really working. And especially we depend with these upgrades on other libraries that have to be first finished before we can actually reuse them, like the JDT. Of course, the JDT has to adopt the Java versions first, and we rely on JDT. And same for Maven Tycho. Maven Tycho uses JDT internally, and of course, first has JDT to be released, and Tycho has to be released, then we can really use that. And especially for the work towards the full support of these Java versions, we did also some testing for the JDT and contributed feedback to the team. Yeah, and this yeah, at the end took us quite some time to support. But now let's see yeah, what happened this in action.
Yeah, before we come to that point, Xtext became 10 years old. That doesn't mean it's old. It's just it evolved. So we have a lot of APIs. We use Google Juice, as you might know. So we have dependency injection, and people always nearly overwrite everything. And that is why nearly everything is API. And of course, we have internal API, but people overwrite that anyway. So we try not to break clients, and that is why it's hard to really do changes in Xtext. Yeah, obviously, it's really pain to stay with the APIs that we have. And we always claim that this is our problem. We have to come out with that. JDT might have the same problem with us. So we are a client of JDT, and obviously we dig too deep. So we used internal API of JDT all the way, and JDT wants to get rid of that. And especially for the last release that we had, it was a pain because there was a method. It might sound easy that there is one method deleted in JDT, but for us there was a big problem. And so the only thing I want to say is it's not that easy anymore to change such a big framework like Xtext before we come to the next points that Carsten wanted to point out.
Okay, so let's see that's in action now. If you now use the project wizard, the Xtext project wizard, you can, of course, now select new Java versions if you have installed them into Eclipse. Mostly this affects build infrastructure, and we will have a look what this means, especially for Maven Tycho-based builds that we often use. The main magic that occurs for Java 9 and 10 support is happening in the parent POM of the project that you create. First of all, you see that yeah, the compiler source and target is changed to 10, and when you selected Java 10, then Xtext will generate Tycho version 1.2.0. You see a comment here above, and we had a problem because at the time that we released Xtext 2.14, Tycho 1.2.0 was not released. And this was mandatory to support Java 10 and JUnit 5. And so we expected that shortly after us, Tycho would be supported. We also tested that on snapshots of Tycho. And so we just produced the version in assumption that it will now be valid. But at the time we released, it was not valid. And if you select Java 9 as target, then it will just produce Tycho version 1.1 here, and the comment would be removed. The next thing that you will recognize is that we have here some properties that don't have value. That's the kind of trick that we do. We use these properties later in the plugin configuration of Surefire. So we see that all these properties are enlisted here to produce the argument line of Surefire. And these properties can be now filled by system properties that you pass into to the Maven workflow, or with some means else. And one of the things that we do to fill these properties is to use Maven profiles. And we have two profiles. One is Mac specific. On Mac OS, you usually have to add this JVM arg to the argument line, which is not valid on the other operating systems. So, but this will only be activated if macOS is your operating system. And if you are on JDK 9 or newer, then this profile gets activated, and it will add this system property, which is enabling the Java module system. So, and if we now look at the UI tests, we also see here that this property is added to the test argument lines of the Maven Surefire plugin, and also only here UI harness is activated. In the parent POM, it was deactivated by default. So this is basically what you actually see from Java 9 and 10 support. So it seems quite a few, but for us it was a big move. Let's take a look at the next feature. JUnit 5 was also released, and we wanted to use also this new framework in Xtext. And the first thing that you will recognize is that the project wizard now supports you to select a JUnit version for testing support. So you can now choose JUnit 4 or 5, what you want. And when you did this, the project wizard will produce already an example code for the supported JUnit library. Let's have a look on how we migrate existing projects from JUnit 4 to JUnit 5. So this is a typical domain model example that you may know in its current version, which is using JUnit 4. And you see all of these JUnit dependencies here, like JUnit jar, Hamcrest, and so you see here the typical test, which uses the Xtext runner and the inject with annotation. And actually, runners are a concept that only exists in JUnit 4. A similar thing exists in JUnit 5, which is called extensions. And this is actually much more flexible. Here you can just use one runner, which influence behavior, how tests are executed, and things are participating in the life cycle of the test. Extensions can be hooked into any of the test life cycle, things like before tests, after tests, before all tests, and so on. And you can have multiple extensions. For JUnit 5 support, we produced one extension. We will see this slightly after this. And you basically replace the runner by our extension. Next thing that changes is how you manage dependencies. You will now use the standard way of Eclipse by using a class path container for JUnit. On the Java build path, you can say your add library, and you have your JUnit library as a selection. And now you can select JUnit 5 as a library, and you see that it puts some jars on your class path then. And what changes now is the way that you manage your dependencies in your manifest. That's the old way. So JUnit 4 went with Xtext until 2.13. We produced import packages for all the things that JUnit 4 was about. We removed that for JUnit 5. And what you now just need is an API for JUnit 5. So this way you will usually put in as a required bundle. The project wizard will do this automatically for you for new projects. But if you would like to change your existing projects, then that's the way to go. And now let's see this a little bit in action. When you have JUnit 5 class path container, then it will appear here as a dependency, and you can also see some more dependencies in there. And now let's execute tests. And this is already a JUnit 5 test. And like you're used to this, you can just execute. So here you will see that we have slightly different annotation. We have this extend with annotation now. And this is actually what changed. You see here the typical add test annotation, but if you look at the imports, that's also a different import. And also this assert equals is not the typical assert equals that you know from JUnit 4, which comes from the assert class. It's also here from the API package of JUnit 4. And when you do this, you can do some fancy stuff. You can, for example, use other display names for tests. So you see we changed here text of the executed test, and you will see this here in the executed test. Actually, you can even use emojis here, and you will see the emojis here in the text. Also, some interesting thing is here you can tag your tests, and you can say, okay, I have fast tests, I have slow tests, I have tests that require UI and that must be executed as plugin tests or just as plain unit tests. And in your JUnit launch configuration, you can now configure which test with which tags you want to execute. So that's quite a nice thing, but that's JUnit 5 stuff. Besides that, you can use parameterized tests, the stream API for tests, but yeah, that's just plain JUnit 5. The only thing that changes for Xtext is the way how we manage dependencies, and yeah, this new annotation that we have.
JUnit 5. Okay, we come to grammar annotations. You might have seen them already. There is content assist inside of an Xtext grammar. Before 2.14, it was only at override. So we added at deprecated, at exported, at final. Why did we do that? Yeah, some things are very annoying, and for that reason, we introduced those annotations to make things easier. Let's start with a very simple annotation. It's at deprecated. So if language will age and you want to change things, you might want to mark things as deprecated. Not only that it is shown inside of a grammar or a grammar that uses your grammar, you want to have that as an warning in instances of your grammar as well. And so for that, we enrich the validator fragment. You might know we use fragment in the Xtext generator. This is a part of the Xtext generator invokement, the MWE2 file. Within that, you have the standard language that we use, and within that, you can configure your fragments. And one fragment is a validation fragment, and in that, you have that generate deprecation validator equals true. That will enable the generation of the validation for showing deprecated parts of your instance. That was a lot of meter. Yeah. So this is how it actually looks. If you want to raise the level of your severity from warning to an error, you can do that. If you use that annotation, Xtext will generate a preference page for you for adjusting the severity of your validations. You can use that for all kinds of validations, not only the generated one, but you have to do a little bit of things. You have to configure things. And when you use that annotation, Xtext will do that for you automatically. So good thing for lazy people like me. Another thing is at final. In Xtext, you can override given parser rules by just using the same name. And by doing that, normally you will not find out if someone don't want you to override his rule. So for that, people can mark a parser rule as at final, and then the grammar language will detect that this is an illegal override of that rule. So it's better than before, not really a big thing. One thing that is for me a big thing is at exported, because you might know that the standard of Xtext exports everything from your language that carries a name into the so-called index. And within that, all the elements that carry a name will be stored inside that index, and you can reference them from outside of your file. And that will consume a lot of memory, and if your language and the instance of your language will become bigger, that might be a problem in the future for you. And some people, maybe a lot of people, don't know how to really filter that. And maybe some people don't do that because it's extra work. For that, we have that at exported annotation for lazy people like me, so that we can generate the so-called default resource description strategy. Oh, that was a long name. And within that, we have a method called create eObject descriptions. You might not know what an eObject descriptions is, read the manuals. But the object description is an object that goes into the index, and by annotating the language, every single element that carries a name and is marked as an exported will get into the index, nothing more. And that is filtering, information hiding that you normally should do, but most of the people don't do. So this feature is not a big deal, but for lazy people, oh, sorry. That was not what I want to do. So we had that grammar annotation here. Let's start from here. Okay. Next thing is create action QUICKFIX. That's pretty simple to say. If you have a rule that has things that are optional, and you might get in, or you will get a warning. And if you click on that warning, oops. If you click on that warning, don't do something. If you click on that warning, you will get a quick fix, and that quick fix will add an action, and that unassigned action call will just create a new instance of that element. So pretty simple. Not really a big deal, but yeah, good to have it. Next thing is the Wizard API. That is actually a great deal, a big deal. Because the Wizard API will give you the opportunity to create wizards for all kinds of things. Let's start with a very needful thing. We have a project wizard. There were some fragments for building project wizards in the past, but they were very simple. So now we have a new fragment, the project wizard fragment, where you can say generate equals true. If you do that, you will get an implementation that is called iProject template provider. Don't have a mouse here anymore. Who cares? The iProject template provider interface will give you the opportunity to handle in a bunch of project templates. And so the only thing you have to do is to override that method and handle in the list. We used extend here because it's very simple to handle back a list in extend. And of course, we want to do a very good job in bringing in very simple APIs. So what we did here is we used active annotations to do that. So if you annotate a class with the annotation @project template and handle in a bunch of different parameters, then you have a full-blown template, a project template that fulfills the contract and has several methods. I will come to that back in a minute. Just by doing that, you will end up in a new project wizard where it shows you a lot of template that you have implemented just by handling them in here. So pretty simple. You don't have to configure something on plugin XML level or other things. So by doing that, you end up in a project wizard, but you can do a little more. Carsten, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just wanted to emphasize that you can also have multiple templates. So
yeah, of course,
you have multiple ways to create projects for your DSL, like a simple project or a full-blown project or some specified project. Then you just add more templates here to the template provider.
Right. That is why it's a list. Okay. Besides that, you can do a lot more. You can build groups. You can say you want to have a lot of input fields like a text or a check, where you can just click on a field, and if it's then it becomes Boolean. And as you can see here, we have a group with the name properties. We have a check if you want to have the advanced properties or not. And we have two text fields. And if you look at that in the project wizard itself, it will look like that. So very simple, but powerful. You don't have to do all that RCP work with that. Just by handling in the configuration, that is enough.
And of course, if you see it at this project template page, you want to have that the property section will get disabled when you uncheck the advanced button, and Olga will now show how this is done.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Okay, validate. If you handle in here value content like string, and you want to have that string for maybe generating a Java class, you have to make sure that you don't use signs that are not okay for Java classes. So for that reason, that is just an example, by the way, you can handle in validations for that propose. Pretty simple. And of course, there is a grayed out area over there, update variables, that Carsten talked about, where you can use the value of other things like advanced.value. Value is a Boolean. If this is true, then the name is enabled or not. So pretty straightforward. And beside that, handling in values, validate them. You can use them, hooray, in generating code. And in this special case, we want to generate a file in addition. So we have that project natures that we want to have on our project, and we want to generate a file in addition. The name of the file is model.stateMachine, because we use a state machine. And there you can use the names or whatever fields you had in your project wizard to fill in gaps in that template, like the normal code generator way that you are used to.
If you're familiar with the code generation support in Xtext, then this here looks rather similar. We wanted to align the new API to the way that we do this with code generation and use Xtend to generate code and use some kind of file access to produce files. It's not the same API, but yeah, it's somehow like this API. So if you're familiar with the code generation with the API, then you should get used to this quite fast.
Yeah, it's the same thing. You handle in a path that you want to generate to, and then you have the string. In this case, it's a rich string because we're using Xtend because we like Xtend for code generating. And yeah, from that point on, you are used to build code generators. So pretty straightforward. Besides the project wizard, we have another one that is the file wizard.
I missed this for years.
Yeah, we had that already. There was a fragment in doing that job, but not really obvious. Now we have a new, hopefully more obvious fragment for doing the job, and I think it's better. Of course, you can say generate
and
to.
It's documented.
And it's documented. And here, same story. If you have that fragment, you will end up in a stub class where you can handle back file templates. It's a list, Carsten.
Yeah, again.
And they can handle back a lot of different templates, file templates. And same story as before. We have an active annotation to make the API smooth, and the name of that is add file template. You handle in a bunch of parameters, and from that point on, you can generate things. You can have checkboxes, you can have combo boxes, you can have input text fields, and it will look like that. So you can say, what is the folder I want to generate to? What name should the class have, or in this case, state, and what kind of template do I want to use? So the template should have in common the same names or the same fields that you configure for your templates. And this will end up in the same way than before, so that we have an API that allows to generate code out of that, and you can use the things that we have specified in the configuration, like the folder or the name. So pretty easy. You can do things, other things like, yeah, maybe can say how many states do you want to generate, or what is the state's name, and you can use that for building code generators. In this case, just iterate over a list from 1 to the number of states that you want to have, and it generates a number of states. So yeah, pretty straightforward, but a big deal. It's documented, it's there, it's easy to use, and you don't have to configure things with the plugin XML. So a big step in building wizards. And we will come to another maybe big thing for Photon, because it's new in Photon.
Yeah. One of the big changes in the platform API of Photon is a feature called code mining. Code mining is a way to enhance a text editor by information, somehow like a hover, which is computed from the state of the text, but is not part of the text. The idea comes from Microsoft. They call it Code Lens. So they show additional information in their editor, and you also have this kind of feature in IntelliJ. And finally, this has been added now to Eclipse. The inventor of code mining, Angelo Zer, is also working on some additions on code mining for eGit and JDT and so far. And yeah, with Xtext, we were one of the first projects that actually adopted this API. Before showing you this in action, I want to emphasize that it's quite challenging for us to implement a new API, since Xtext has to be also backward compatible for some older Eclipse releases. We are actually backward compatible to Eclipse Luna. So DSLs that you build with on an Eclipse Photon platform should be deployable on Eclipse Luna, and yeah, without breaking the editor. And this is quite challenging. So what happened is that we actually have a new plugin which is dependent on yeah, a platform level, and when this level is not available, then this plugin will just not be activated. But then our API has be so smart enough that it also detects that this plugin is not available, and do not activate the parts that are depending on this code mining API. But now let's look how this actually looks like in action. So this is the typical example from the domain model example that ships with Eclipse. And here we implemented code mining. You see in this DSL, we have operations of entities which have a return type in this kind of string. Actually, in the grammar definition of this language, the return type is optional. And when it's not specified, this colon string, then the return type is inferred. So you don't see that. But actually, it's a value of the information. And with code mining, you can just insert that again. So what happens is now the code mining will just produce that text. It looks like text, but it is not text. And so we change now the value that it will be an int, and it's automatically displayed. And we think this is a very valuable addition for text editors. And in the future, we just want to yeah, also use this API more.
Yeah, don't get us wrong. It's not just for showing inferred types. It's for showing whatever.
Yeah, you can actually also produce actions into the code. For example, Angelo has produced an extension for JUnit, so that when you have a test method, then you will have a run button on above the text, and you can just click on that, also with code mining. And we wanted to produce a smart API that allows you to implement code mining for Xtext languages. Now let's have a look into the details how you enable this. First thing is to use a certain fragment that's not activated by default, because you might not want to have code minings in your language. And of course, code minings come with a small performance impact. You may want to have this because it's helping the users more. But if you don't want to have this, just do not enhance the fragment. So we will produce a stub now, and basically what this stub will do is produce a class called MyDSL Code Mining Provider, which extends from base class abstract Xtext Code Mining Provider. And what we do not see here is that that the project will have an additional dependency on a new plugin of Eclipse Xtext UI Code Mining. Basically, what you have to do is implement one method. This method is called create code minings, and we try to have the same pattern that we have to in Xtext also for other use cases like content assist acceptor pattern. And we basically you have the task to create code minings and pass that to the acceptor for a document. Now let's look a little bit into this implementation. That's the implementation from the domain model example, and that's a good blueprint for your code mining provider. This code mining provider will get all operations from your document and loop over that. For each operation, we only want to consider operations that don't have an explicit return type. So all the others we ignore. And when we don't have a return type, we have an inferred type. Compute that inferred type from the JVM model associations, and we'll have the simple name of the inferred type in the variable return type name. The next task, if you have this name and the operation, is to find the position where you have to insert the code mining into your document. That's actually an offset that you have to compute in the document. And therefore, you typically want to use the node model and access it through the node model utils to find the right position. In our case, it's we want to insert the inferred code, Java type right of the right parentheses of the method parameters. And therefore, we search for that element. And last but not least, we create a mining. We have in the base class some convenience methods like create new line content code mining. There's a distinction between line content code minings, and you can also have code minings above a line. That's a line header code mining. Also for that, you will have another utility method. Yeah, and that's basically what you have to do to enhance your language with code mining.
Yeah, as we said, a lot of things happen behind the covers. So bringing Java 9 and 10 to Xtext was a big deal, but we cannot really show you a lot. So it's just that we can use and interact with Java 9 and 10. But actually, it was a lot of work. Beside that, we always try to make things more performant. And we do that for several reasons, because people create big systems with Xtext, very big systems with millions and millions of lines of DSLs. And yeah, people do that, and we always have the challenge to make things smooth again. And in most of the cases, we try to bring that back to the framework. But in nearly most of the cases, adjustments are so special for that special DSL and for that special use case that we cannot bring that back. And yeah, we just wanted to point out that we still try to do that. Currently in 2.14, you will see that in the release notes, we have seen things like that semantic highlighting was triggered twice or things like that. That are things that we can bring back to the framework. But other things like making the node model smaller or things like that, currently there's no way of doing that. Carsten, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Besides the performance of Xtext itself, it is also worth to mention that the performance of Photon has improved quite a lot. Since we also found out that things that tend to be slower or improvable in Xtext are actually things that have to be fixed in the platform. And so we got involved there and changed quite a few things in Eclipse Photon platform to make Eclipse and Xtext faster.
Carsten became recently platform committer. Yeah. Beside that, there is memory consumption. I see that YouTube is lacking. So I'm talking and now you see the screen. Memory consumption is, as I said, things like the node model. We have ways of switching off the node model, and you will save a lot of memory, but still that is not something that we can bring back to the framework. So that's a very special thing. But this slide is just there for saying we really try. We have big projects at customer side, and we see there are a lot of things that people adjust, or that we adjust things for customers, and we try to bring that back to the framework as well. Last but not least, we have to become more lazy. So what we do currently is we try to make things more smooth in doing things only once, or do it only at that time when we really need that, not as a greedy one. So And we try to do that a lot in Xtext, and we will keep on trying. And that is what comes to the next slide. What's next, Carsten? What's next?
Yeah, future is open. Yeah, first of all, we said the release cycles of Eclipse and Java are changing, and of course we have to keep somehow the pace. So we decided that we want to have also half-year releases of Xtext, and yeah, we expect that we will ship the next release of Xtext this year. We don't have a concrete release date so far, but in this version we likely do not adopt Java 11 so far. I'm expecting that we do this with 2.16. Besides that, we have some open discussion about changing license to EPL2, like all the other Eclipse projects are slowly adopting this new license. But yeah, we have to talk with all the stakeholders. We have to adopt quite a lot of files. We have tons of source files which state the old license. We're not pretty sure that if we want to do this right now, but this will come definitely in the future.
One point that is always on discussion is getting rid of using internal APIs. So we did that for JDT. It hurt, but it's hard to get rid of that. So, but we try. That is something that we will do next.
Mm-hmm. Also, we want to do some work on the release engineering. Until now, it's quite hard to ship a new Xtext release. Costs some days to actually produce that, and we have all this maintenance work that we spoke in front of. And if we just change Tycho version, for example, and this affects quite a lot of files over several repositories. And yeah, we're working on automating this and providing direct support for the developers in our CI infrastructure. Talking about CI infrastructure, there's a big change on the Eclipse infrastructure coming up. All projects will move from Jenkins to cloud-based Jenkins Enterprise. And the Xtext project will be one of the first volunteers that will change all build jobs to move to the new infrastructure. And yeah, this will keep us busy also.
Okay. So in addition, we will have a lot of discussions ongoing. We're not quite sure what the next step is, but we would like to, first of all, thank you for being there. And we would like to go into discussion. Stephanie, could you help us out? How do we do that?
Yeah, it's here, just on the chat here. But until now, no one asked concrete questions. But I think the people that are watching know how to reach out to us. You can reach us on Gitter and on GitHub in the Eclipse forum. Just ask there and participate in the Xtext development. We are happily involving more developers. If you have questions how you can contribute, just ask us. And Dennis is asking. Yes, this session is recorded. And I think Stephanie could send the link. Huh?
You have to speak in that direction.
Yes, sorry. I was just focusing on the question, which is on my right side. Yes, so then it's, this session is recorded and will be available, I think, just on YouTube, like here.
Yeah, it'll be available on the Eclipse Foundation channel. Essentially, when this webinar ends, it will turn into the link. So anybody watching can just click on it and access this session.
Okay.
So, okay, then thanks again.
I think we're done.
Perfect. Thanks, Karsten and Holger, for a fantastic demo and presentation. And of course, thanks to our community for tuning in. As of right now, we don't have any other further questions, so feel free to drop us a line on our YouTube channel, on Twitter, or on our Meetup page, and we will send all questions over to Holger and Karsten to answer. So again, I'd like to say thank you to Karsten and Holger for doing such a great presentation. It was very informative, so thanks, guys. And tomorrow we will see you for our next webinar, Developing with Eclipse Collections. So have a great day, everybody.